Hello friends, welcome to Growing Scientist, and today I'll talk about Redux toolkits. So what is Redux toolkit? So why is it required? So talking about Redux toolkit, it is an alternative to React Redux store. So um, why do we need Redux toolkit? So primarily the reason for Redux toolkit was that creating a Redux store was a complicated process, plus it requires a lot of dependencies, so that adds complexity to it. So and also we have to write a lot of code to implement a Redux store. So Redux toolkit focuses on these problems and reduces this problem. So let's now revise how Redux stores work. So I've already created a video on Redux stores. If you want to see that, the link is given in the description, but let's revise briefly how Redux store works. So I'm in the documentation of Redux. So as you can see from the animation, this is our UI, and UI creates dispatches an action which goes to the store, and in the store we have a reducer which based on action type changes the state, and that change is reflected on the UI. This is how our uh, Redux store works. So now let's create a new React project using create React app, say RTK, and let me fast forward it, and let me start this project by cd into RTK, and also let me open the code in the Visual Studio. Now in the app.js, let's clean the code and remove all this excess of code, and let's also add a hello to our main component. It's reflecting. Let's now add the install two dependencies, that is React Redux and Redux toolkits. Now let's check the dependencies in our packet.json file. So in our packet.json file, you can see the Redux toolkit and React Redux both are added. So now let's create store by importing configure store from Redux toolkits. So this is analogous to the create store that we use in Redux. So this configure store automatically configures your stores and takes as an object your reducers. Let's copy the code and in our project create a store file to create a store. Inside store.jsx, let's paste the code, and I'll tell you what this reducer inside the store takes. So this reducer inside the store takes the list of reducers that we are going to define in a moment. So the next step is to provide this store to the whole app. So we'll go to the index.js, where we will cover the whole app with our provider component having store as an argument. So let's import a store that we have defined and the provider. And now let's wrap the whole app with the provider having store as an argument. Now the next step is to create a Redux slice. Redux slice is almost equivalent to Redux reducer. Actually it's an advanced form of Redux reducer. So let's create a file called slice.jsx. So in the slice.jsx, as you can see the code, we are creating a slice by importing create slice from Redux-Toolkit. So before creating slice, let's recall what Redux reducer does. So Redux reducer takes two things, the state and action, and based on the action type it changes the state immutably. So that was the conventional Redux reducer. So create slice is analogous to the Redux reducer. So let's first create a slice and export it. Say user details is equal to create slice, and this create slice takes an object having three properties. One is name object, that is the reducer's name, slice name, and the second is the initial state, that is the state, and the third is the reducer's object. So I have named the slice by user details. Now let's define our initial state. So a user detail, in the user detail we can store user details like user and the name of the user ID, and the user's phone number. So currently user name and ID is blank and the phone number is set to null. So this is our initial state. Now let's go ahead and define the third property, that is the reducers. Reducers take an object having all the actions. So we will define the actions, and we will also define how that action will change the state here. So inside reducers object we will define our actions that will make changes in the state. So let's change the for changing the name of the user, let's define an action here called set username, and this set username takes a callback which has state and payload in its arguments. So in this callback we will set the state name to the payload pass, not the payload, the action. So let's change action dot payload. So this is how we are setting the username from the action using action. Similarly, let's change the user ID and phone number by defining different actions. So for changing the user ID, let's say set user ID and set user ID. Okay, we have an error here. So set user ID, it's taking state and action, and based on the payload it is changing the user ID. Similarly, for setting the phone number, set phone action, it's doing the same thing, taking the state and action, and based on the action it's returning the phone number, state.phone, based on the payload. Now let's export the actions by destructuring them. Set username, set user ID, and set phone is equal to user details dot actions, and okay, I forgot to add the concept. Let's export the reducer user details dot reducer. Now let's import that slice we have created from the slice file and add that slice, say user details, inside the reducer object. So now our store creation is completed and also our store is connected to the whole app. Now let's use import our store to the app and see its value using use selector hook. So I'm importing the state. I'm also selecting the state dot reducer name which we have used inside the store file. So the user details reducer, it will return the state of user detail reducer. And now let's console that state. Initial user state. Alright, here is my app and let me open the console, and we have an object showing the initial state of user state. So our store is working fine. Now let's dispatch some action to our user detail store. Let's also import the set username action and dispatch those actions from the app component. So I'm importing all the actions, set username, set user ID and set phone from the slice. Now let's also import the use effect hook from React. Actually I will be dispatching the action when the component loads for the first time. So first let's define dispatch, and now let's use effect, and inside the callback I'll be calling dispatch set user name action and passing the username, say my name Piyush. Also let's change this in console to user state, and now let's save and see. We are getting an error, enable producer returned a new value. So on inspecting in the store, actually we are returning a value. We should not return it. Actually we should change this to a multi-line statement. So let me change this actions to multi-line statement, that way we are not returning any value. So let me do this for each action. Let's save it and now check the result. So now you can see the name is changed. Now let's try dispatching the other actions also. So let me copy this and paste, and let me set user ID now. User ID to some string, say 1. See, it's reflecting, it's changing. Now let's try with the set phone action, and let me pass some integer here. Okay, let's save it and see the changes. So you can see the store is successfully updating. So that was all about Redux Toolkit. So basically a slice is an advanced reducer having a reducer a property in which we define the actions which changes the state of the reducer through that actions mutably. So that's all in this video. I hope you like this video. You would share this video more and more, and also subscribe this channel. Thank you.